Welcome to the October webinar of the Center for Grateful Leadership. I'm so pleased and delighted to have each and every one of you here. And we have a fantastic guest presenter today, whom I will introduce in just a moment. But it's really a time when coming together has a very special purpose and a special meaning. And when we can talk about something that's important to each and every one of us, it really shores us up and makes us stronger. So this community, this grateful leadership community, is just the greatest resource imaginable. And the people who listen to it afterwards when it's recorded and archived, we welcome you as well. And please join us every month for these webinars. Live is even more fun, but still, anybody can come at any time and review months before presentations, which are fantastic also. So I have the great pleasure of introducing Al Zeitoun. Now, I've known Al for a lot of years, and it actually goes back into the 1990s when he and I worked together on a wonderful series of satellite broadcasts. In those days, we had to use satellites. We used to have to uplink a satellite, and it went to 3,000 people all over the world. It was really breakthrough technology in those days, and it was called Hot Topics, Tools and Techniques in Project Management. And I told Al before, with his permission, I was going to severely embarrass myself at what happened in the first session, the first of the 6 sessions, because it was going so well. It was a beautiful studio. We had everything we needed. And Al was so excited, as was I. And he just came over to me, gave me a big hug, picked me up in the air and spun me around. And then his back broke. It was such a shocking event. And he was in agony. We thought we were going to lose you, Al. And by some synchronicity or the stars being in the right position, our sound man was able to do some kind of a healing technique with you. We had to take an extra hour for you to be healed. and you were as good as new. So, but Al is, he's got so many skills and so many talents. And as I was kind of embarrassing him a little bit before, I said, he's Mr. Likeability. Everybody loves working with Al. And he's been doing many different things. He was at Booz Allen Hamilton for quite a number of years. And what were you? That you were senior program management expert. He's been a jury member of the Hamdan bin Mohammed Award for Innovation in Project Management for a number of years. But now he is a future of work, business optimization, and operational performance excellence thought leader. You've always been that. You've always been working on from 1.0 to 2.0. Now we've gone to the human being 3.0. And Al, I'm just so thrilled to have you here. This is going to be a great presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Judy, and it's a pleasure. And yes, you dated me and you did all the damage that I could think of here in terms of the journey, but I love it, and it's great to be connected over the years. And also I appreciate so much your level of energy, Judy, when it comes to topics that I'm super passionate about. And definitely today's topic is an example of those. And when you mentioned 3.0, which is going to be definitely part of what we get into in our session today, it is, times like COVID-19, I think it's really, are times that are such a backdrop for us to recognize the human dimension and, the impact that we do have with not only actions or behaviors, but the words we choose, the language we choose, the way we connect with others, and the amount of real conscientious existence almost, Judy, right? So the reality is, yes, I could be Mr. Likeability, and yes, LQ is one of those topics I was very passionate about a long time ago, also as Tim Sanders and others in Yahoo at the time were writing Love as a Killer app and getting into those kind of topics and their applicability to the world of business and projects in my side was very intriguing. But I think, generally speaking, individually and organizations, we have not done a super good job in really understanding the lessons and also incorporating that in the DNA of our cultures and how we cascade that. So when I pick the words, not only mind the gap, which I'll get into here in a second, but also the future of work, there has been a massive amount. If we do a Google search right now on the words future of work or ways of working or any of that, you're going to get massive number of hits. But the reality is, you look at it, you see it more digitally speaking. You see a lot in terms of AI and IoT and all those things, but the people element and the component by which we have to almost force ourselves in some cases, because we have to rethink and almost detonate how we think and approach work and approach interacting with one another, has been always intriguing to me in my life and programs, in my life and getting governance and methodologies in place or trying to transform organizations. So that's why I'm hopeful that today we will get a chance to start getting into the relationship of this, especially with the grateful leaders and the kind of attributes that we as leaders, the responsibilities we have in creating not only impact on ourselves to remain sane and effective and productive, but also to create the valuable impact we could have on others. Just to go also and give credit where credit is due, this gap dimensions here that we're going to get into, this actually, and I don't know how many of us are, I hope many of us are doing a lot of podcast listening, including Judy's podcast and so on. Now, this came from Gary V. It's not like trademarked or copyrighted or anything, but Gary V, if you're familiar with him, he was on a podcast with Vishen Lakhiani is how he pronounces his name, and it's what's called Mind Valley is what Vishen does. And some of the interaction he was having with Gary V and trying to get out of Gary, how is he keeping himself sane in the times of COVID-19? And so Gary just talked about some words, and then suddenly, oh, that sounds like it could be organized as GAP. So there was kind of laughingly bringing that across. So we'll talk about elements of GAP. I'll share with you a couple of examples quickly from the experience Judy was referring to in my journey, but hopefully then bring that also back to our interest, our passion around the topic of this series of webinars as well. Right? Some of the elements supporting that is the adaptive mindset. What Judy was reading that sound or stating as which sounded like a handful of words is this whole interest being a future work mechanic, operational optimization, etc. To me, a lot of it hinges on what you see here as topics for us: adaptive mindset, the human 3.0, and really tying that to the future of work that we are all trying to shape. I don't know how good getting inputs from you on the medium is going to be like, but I'd like to maybe even pause for a minute to set the stage and hear from you, just a word or two, or you can type something in the chat. Could be easier given sometimes the audio connectivity and so forth. But if you have any initial points to raise about this time of the last 7 or so months we lived through, what kind of disruptions has that created for you personally, to the organizations, for the kind of leadership that we started seeing evidence that was successful? Would be great to hear 1 or 2 comments first as we set the stage for our short time together, and maybe something in the chat would suffice as well if you feel more comfortable that way. So any thoughts? Don't be shy. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Al. This is Jim Trella. Just wanted to, I was on a one-on-one with my current manager this morning, and we were talking about the way both of us, when we have issues, we like to go face-to-face to people. We like to be able to walk to their office, sit at a table, go for a walk, whatever it was. And this particular disruption, COVID-19, has really interrupted that. So now what we have to do is we actually had to try to find a better way. For example, when I'm doing my work, I'm trying to do more of it with the video on than the video off at this time, so that you can see the people and not just hear them. So I think it's going to be interesting, especially because I know that I work for General Motors, and what's going on is a lot of how long are we going to be in this work remotely mode, and if so, what does that mean to keep those relationships and building those relationships.
Jem, thank you for that. And I think that's so true. And that's why also even platforms like the one we're having this webinar on has been, challenging itself, right? It didn't have good, relatively good video capabilities. They're improving that. They're changing platforms. Roxy was indicating, forcing organizations to upgrade technology. But it's even forcing us to really do the changes that we have not been doing that we wanted to do over the years. Some of the examples that I've witnessed, even organizations that are close to my heart, like Project Management Institute, and their drive for digital transformation, the ideas were there. I served on the PMI board of directors many years, and digital transformation was a big priority. And then suddenly COVID-19 comes around, and many of the initiatives that were supposed to happen over the years were immediately, almost instantaneously turned on, including things like offering the certification exams online across the board. The PMP and those kinds of things were in fact initially thought to be a challenge and so forth, right? So there's a lot that, not only from an urgency standpoint, but also from appreciating the fact that I need to be sensible. I think what I'm hearing, Jim's comments as well, is being sensible to what is going to make the biggest difference. How can I maintain level of connection? And if it's going to be an additional capability in the platform to have that video or the human touch, be it the case, let's go after that as well. Angela says more planning is needed, less water cooler. Yes, go ahead, Judy. Yeah.
I was just going to read Roxy's comments. I think it's very valid and valuable. It has also shown how remote working can save organizations a significant amount of money.
100%. 100%.
No more rent to pay unless you're still having to pay rent for your shut down offices. Yeah. But I think that's very important. And then I'm going to just tell you my change during this period. And that has been, I dream about COVID. I dream that I've been invited to a dinner and nobody's wearing masks. And I get so upset, and I ask them to please wear masks. And they say, well, we have to eat. And I said, well, just lift your mask down, up and down. And I mean, I swear, I dream about these things. So it's coming in on a very, very deep level, I think to all people. I don't know if other people dream about it. But anyway, Al, let's go on with your presentation so we don't have to stop in the middle.
No, absolutely fine. But this was important because it's really great to get the mindset and to understand where people are at. And just to final thought on what you just said, Judy, as well. Like in my daughter's coming back to school event earlier, this semester, they had a session with just the parents and say, what's the one thing you want to do after COVID? And, I said, I'm a hugger. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to hug everybody, right? So it's like, so it resonates very differently with everybody. Depends on also, to a great extent, what are they grateful of, right? What is really important to them? And to me, when people say that COVID-19 really is a major reset, right? It's really allowed us to, or at least it's going to allow the ones who are conscientious enough to understand that this is a reset, right? No matter how terrible the disease is or the pandemic and the implications of it, the reality is, I'm hopeful that on the outside of that, it's going to create a very different level of gratefulness across many of us, and hopefully across multiple number of countries and regions as well. And that's, again, to me, that's a very strong connection to the art of, of acknowledgement and the grateful leadership. Because when you think about those elements of the gap that, I heard, Gary Vee talking about it in a different context, but I thought, hey, let's bring this back in the discussion, because if I look at what really kept my sanity as well during this time, and what some of the changes that I've seen happen personally in organizations I work with, it was really around those three buckets. I'm gonna go to the first one in a minute, but the reality is that third one is extremely powerful. Perspective. To me, if I want to enhance my ability as a leader to become much more capable and allowing the right level of dialogues to happen, the interactivity with humans to happen, the achievement of outcomes and the result, it really builds on the perspective. I mentioned here the PMI board story, which I can add more to it in a second, but also even folks like Simon Sinek. Even in simple views like Leader Speak Less and some of the work that he's done in that area, the intention behind all of that is, can we maintain perspective? Can we step back? Can we look holistically at what's really happening across the team and across the organization so that we can become much more relevant in the changes we create? The PMI board was really more focused on, can we as a board, step away from the day-to-day, which is always a challenge? Can we have a different perspective? And what does that do to the way by which we lead and the expectation of that leadership? And speaking of that, accountability. So I'm kind of walking it backward. And there, my lessons learned, especially when I worked in the energy program in the Middle East, is that accountability is not something that's forced. Accountability is something that leaders definitely have got to be, as we know across the room here, have got to be in a very good position to realize that this is the way by which I can enjoy the impact I create in the journey that I'm going on. So owning the words, owning the interactions, owning not only the classic work and deliverables and those pieces that we usually focus on as individuals and leaders, but realizing that we are there and those journeys that we have in our organizations to ultimately have people carried along with us on that journey, have others be motivated, the inclusivity. When we talk these days about inclusivity more, etc., all of that begins when we have ownership for any and every interaction we have. On the gratitude side, and of course I realize the difference between gratitude and gratefulness. What I like about gratitude and how it helps me become a grateful leader in a way, it's the state that it creates, right? So it's almost this whole notion of having to force being a grateful leader. If I don't have gratitude, it's going to be forceful. It's not going to be natural. It's not going to be as authentic. So one of the things that I've seen that, and thus the focus on gap here and how it relates to the pandemic, is that I'm hopeful that it allows us to have a much better sense of gratitude for what, the blessings we have, the ways by which we, contribute to others and to society and humanity and to the environment and whatever it is that is a priority. When I mentioned Dr. Kirzner there as a story, he's one of the ones I'm super grateful for in my journey, because when you interact with someone like Kirzner and he sees me for the first time, speaking of dating, and it's back, or time dating, Judy, and it's back to Indianapolis, actually before my first time meeting you. So that's 1994 now. And he says, you got to see Laverne Johnson. You got to see, you got to step away from this manufacturing bubble that I was involved in at the time, running, manufacturing programs and so forth in the paper industry. And, this is the person you want to associate with. And, I owe him a ton of gratitude in the interaction and journey with her, but also the nature of the relationship Dr. Kirzner keeps with people who he entrusts and believes in and shares those grateful times with, right? So we're now sitting in 2020, and the man still remains not only super connected, but also, very grateful to the relationship we have, and he shows it. He doesn't have to show it, and he's exercising the humbleness that we also need to see a lot with the grateful leadership style that we want to see in many of our organizations. So that's a dynamic that I'm hopeful that the COVID-19 pandemic is a restart almost in terms of some of the practices coming back in a very positive way to all of us and to our organizations. Yeah. So definitely, the transition here is the mindset piece, and I'm trying to share with you also the huge passion that I have around leaders who are continuously working on their mindset. Yeah. So we've seen over the years, we've talked a lot about adaptability. You heard Anna in her introduction earlier talking about getting more into Agile and Scrum and some of the practices and the ways by people work in their organizations. Reality is, even before 2020, we've always gotten into this this fast pace, 2-hour chaos, I call it here on the slide, in terms of how things dramatically change. So the hypothesis that I'm used to start looking at, what do we do about the human changes that we're going through, is that for us to survive, and to not only survive but to really continue to be impactful, what can I do to really get this here? It's something around maybe achieving calm, mastering mindfulness, but trying to have a systematic way of leading as well. Because we're all familiar, hopefully, with the VUCA terminology, with how much volatility and uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity, etc., existed over the years. For us to move up or to contribute better or to develop, it does require a very different way of, especially tying back to the gap, and that's why the P that I started with, the perspective component. How can I, find ways by which I'm always able to get out of myself and connect with the team, connect to the organization, to think about also the world's impact that I create, because the reality is every single one of us including myself, that's ultimately what we want to see, different. The ability to have that conscientious leadership that I would be possessing at the time, able to grow that across multiple layers. I use exercise like what's called the World Cafe a lot with my teams, for example. The World Cafe allows us to go through those rounds and we look at things more individually versus as a team versus as an organization, and just to be able to adjust the mindset to achieve that and create that conscious behavior leads again to that leader being not only grateful to the impact and the contributions the team and other members of the organizations are bringing to the mix, but it changes demeanors, it changes behavior, it changes ways of relating impact. And that drove me to tie it in some kind of an equation. Being an engineer nerd, I'm an engineer by training and a civil engineer by training, even though I'm not talking anything engineering today, but having an equation gives me some comfort and some safety in a way. So the reason I picked Zeit, I was also in the Middle East in that energy program, and they had Zeit as their core values to create a culture of safety. Very different side. It had nothing to do with this. Like, for example, their T was transparency, because that's a core value that's needed in the nuclear industry. For me here, the selection I had is sensing, intentionality, thoughtfulness, and energy. And this coming out of multitude of interviews I've conducted earlier this year. It's coming out of also multiple number of personal reflections on what has been working well and not working well, and connecting differently with humans, especially this element of agility you see on the left-hand side, back to the adaptability of approach and mindset. So how can I work on my sensing? A recommendation there, if you haven't seen the book or read the book, Sensing and Responding, or Sense and Respond, is a great book in that regard. Intentionality, I cannot pick enough. There's a multitude of sources there that I believe have really allowed us to do a very good job there. I mean, Jay Shetty, if you are into podcasts, he has what's called the Think Like a Monk recently, right? So I think that allows really finding ourselves in a place where we are both intentional and thoughtful. Thoughtful to me is the biggest connector to grateful leaders' behaviors, because if we are unable to be thoughtful enough to establish those connections in my mind between where people are at, the whole empathy notion, what is the right ways by which I'm not only interacting but also adding value, and realizing that sometimes the best thing I do is not say a single word, right? All of those things in terms of that human equation to create the right energy. Energy is a big one for me, especially in my world in consulting, because I'm a big fan of the statement, the smell of the place, right? So you can easily, when you walk into an organization and a team, if you're really sensing things well, thoughtful, intentional, you can smell the place. What does that mean? Well, you can tell a lot about the interactions of the team and the way they're talking, the way they're contributing, the way they're recognizing each other, the way they're appreciating contributions, open to different ideas. All of that creates an environment that's very different to sometimes the unfortunate environments we have. So Human 3.0, in a way, I call it the responsible mindset. So Human 3.0 is, a lot of ingredients you can see here in terms of safety, especially. How do I have that safe culture? Do I have the exchanges at a level where I'm super comfortable in contributing to dialogues and to the debates that might be happening? And there could be lots of skills here. You can see very classic ones between the strength of these emotional aspects, the resilience that we're also learning a lot through these times, the collaboration, which is by far PMI, the Project Management Institute, picks that as like the power skill of the future, given the fact that it's much more than just a soft.
Al, we've frozen you, so you might want to just turn your webcam off for now, have a little more bandwidth so we can at least hear you. Roxy, any suggestions?
Certainly turning off his webcam. I don't know if he is completely frozen or if he can hear us.
Can you hear us, Al? Okay, he's done that. Al, let's see if we can hear you now.
No, he actually left the room. I'm sure he'll be right back in.
Well, let me mention while we're waiting for Al to return, Harry Waldron in the chat talked about balancing home versus work now being very important during this pandemic. And also my IIL blog post article on project management for parenting. And I think that was Hillary, I can't remember, Kinney, who was the author of that, if I'm not mistaken. She did a presentation for our upcoming International Project Management Day conference. So that is probably who it was. Thank you for that, Harry. And Angela had talked about more planning is needed as we have less water cooler time. And also conversations and connections. Yeah, those are definitely missing if we don't seek them out. Leaders will need to connect and build trust.
So
we can't see each other in person.
We're dangerous together.
Yeah, we're glad to have you back, Al.
It seems like we're dangerous. Now I fell on my back again. It sounds like it, or broke my back. It seems like it. This one technology though. It is funny we're saying that when we transform. Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's like we talk about the transformation is really not technology, and here we go. Technology does prove itself that it has to be part of the mix. All right. So just to recap that, when you tie this to the future of work, right, and we talk about, what can we do, from thinking through the elements, let's say, of the gap to the kind of adaptability in the mindset and the kind of changes that I need to be considering individually as humans, and tie that to creating a very different kind of a future of work. So the reality is we have to be very clear on what our weapons are. So I started here by talking about the weapon being curiosity. And to me, nothing has helped me as a leader in this day and age, no matter how old we get, and no matter how much we joke about, dating ourselves, etc., is if I can maintain a curious mind, if I can maintain this whole notion of that I'm going to learn from every interaction, I'm going to learn from every human being I interact with. This, to me, when I call it ignited by the power of practicing grateful leadership, to me, the two are almost super connected, because that being curious makes me want to, as a leader, to also express my gratefulness, to always be taking the stance that is going to allow me to absorb almost always what's coming across to me. Part of that is the second one is super important, in my opinion, and it's one of the hardest things to do. And again, going back to Kersner, the first thing he taught me sitting down having breakfast in that restaurant, that hotel, when he was invited to speak in Indianapolis, Indiana, when I was chapter president in '94, is that literally he says, Al, the worst thing you can do is to hire a project manager who has always done certain things the exact same way time and again. I've never forgotten that. Yeah. So make sure you are hiring people who can get unstuck, who are able so easily to think about that their way may not be the best way. You can think of that as vulnerability. You can think of that as humbleness. You can think of it in multi number of ways. But I can't imagine being a grateful leader unless I'm able to also learn and live and learn or unlearn or getting myself unstuck. All of those are elements of the kind of leader we hopefully want to be as well, right? Let me see, the camera somehow stopped. So the whole idea of trying to create more of a scenarios kind of a mind, right? So having ways by which that I'm experimental enough, because ultimately, especially when it comes to human beings, if we think we have figured out the recipe to interact and it's going to work across the board with multiple number of stakeholders, or even with the same person twice, we better be thinking twice as well, right? So it's really having that ability to be flexible enough to rethink approach, I think, does go a long way, and it does help us tremendously too. Yeah. So power skills, it's a terminology that, as I mentioned, PMI has been utilizing now to emphasize that anything that we classically talk about as a soft skill, whether it's any of the classic elements of communications or the one I selected here to support the Human 3.0 model, to me, this challenging the stuck mental models would be one of the hardest and the most important ones. The number one thing when I'm working with a team and I'm trying to give a team a tough love per se, I want to detonate the ways by which they're thinking. I want to be able to get them to be comfortable enough to know that there's a different way and a better way. Some of that is simplifying I like that a lot, because we need to, as leaders, as you know, to find ways by which we are much more concrete and simple in how we are getting our not only our message across, but also the ways by which we are connecting. So combination of that and the grateful storytelling, taking the time, as we know, especially as Judy has taken us through the practice of grateful leadership, is the ability to have stories that can resonate with the person who is in a position to get some guidance and coaching, etc., from you on a topic. And so having the ability to have a flow to that story, to have the story truly connect, not just to the mind. It's very, some people are very good in having stories that connect to the mind, but does it connect to the heart? I've always been a fan, and Judy may have heard me before talking about the 3H. The head, the heart, and the hand. We're all good at the execution, or we think we are, but execution is meaningless unless we really have tied that to the proper impact we want to create from that interaction, and eventually make sure that it is connected, of course, to the heart of the person I'm working with. Yeah. So having even the continual updates to the questions we use has helped me tremendously create that humbleness. What am I missing? When I walk into a meeting and I use a question like that, immediately allows folks I'm working with and the other humans around the room to realize, this guy maybe wants to learn something, right? This guy really does not maybe believe he or she has all the answers. Just to recap a couple of things and to try to spend some time for dialogue, a couple more things to focus on. Part of that is, again, we at the end of the day, we have to find ways by which we continuously relate to our stakeholders. Yeah. So the strategic positioning, I call it, positioning, is very important. And the way by doing this, there are two takeaways, hopefully, from this discussion. One, and that's why I elected this particular picture, there is nothing better for me than to go back to this mindset. Yeah, to really create that beginner's mind connection is one of the most powerful things I've seen, either leaders I work with or leaders I aspire to be like, or when I'm in my zone. This is the best place to be, because not only, the adaptive mindset is going to be the most, because as you know from that picture, the child falls down and be super happy that he or she fell, unlike us when we get too stuck, or unlike us when we say, oh, we tried so many times. They're not going to stop trying. Yeah. So this whole notion from developing and using that grateful beginner's mindset, oh, thanks for help, but hey, let me try again, or, appreciating the help to give you another motivation and initiative to move on. Second one, which is back to the P we had earlier, to relate this back to the gap. This is the perspective component. And the difference between the dance floor and the balcony, to me, is one of my biggest learnings across the years. Again, almost like I had to save myself from the engineering world, where I'm so focused on details and focusing on exactly getting things exact and right. And I remember the days in which, Kansas, I working in engineering, I was doing like design CAD and AutoCAD and those things. And every line and every spacing makes a matter, but sometimes you lose the big picture. At the end of the day, the developer in that particular environment may not be even interested. Yeah. So intentionally stepping away and having that capability as a leader, not only will it allow you to see who's really contributing what, who is it that I need to extend hand to and help more, what is really happening on the dance floor that is making more meaningful connection to the results and the outcomes and the benefits of the exchange that we're having with others. To me, if we develop that skill, if we develop those muscles, does definitely help us a long way. Just to summarize, so we can have possibly some time also for interactions and views from across the team. If I'm talking about being future ready, and everybody is anxious about that, and the level of being anxious obviously increases in times like we are, I had to put grateful leadership on the top, not just because I'm here with Judy, but then the reality is, it is one of those attributes that if you think about it, if we don't learn this now, if we don't really come to a place where we understand both gratitude and gratefulness and understand exactly what kind of a difference this would make in times when there is concern, there is suffering, there's disconnect, there is anxiousness, somebody's dreaming about COVID, etc. Right? So this is the time for us to be very careful about making sure that we are exercising and practicing that, whether getting help from others to understand how to do it, or us experimenting more back to the adaptability and seeing what resonates with the other human 3.0, or at least human intelligence at some point. Innovation of ways we do things, back to the creativity, those two, the ownership aspect, going back to the accountability, It is very easy to blame others and circumstances and politics and so on. This is the time to step up. This is the time to say, yeah, okay, what am I doing about it, right? So that's where leaders are not only grateful, but they're also doing something with that gratefulness in terms of impacting others and also growing along the way. And again, I'm talking to myself as well in terms of, doing more of that so that we can actually grow better, of course. And this sponge learning is related to that. What I love about the sponge analogy is like, how the sponge is. You're absorbing a lot, you're learning a lot from those interactions and from the ones you're grateful for and you're trying to show gratefulness to, but then also once in a while you squeeze that sponge, so back to the unlearning, or the unleashing almost of a different way of connecting and relating to others as well. And of course, that all helps tremendously with the perspective component. So with that, I would like to maybe stop here and allow some dialogues and interaction. I'll be happy to reflect in a bit more detail on any of the areas or the questions or go back to a certain point. I think that would be a pleasure for me and honor to maybe address further with the team.
Al, thank you so much for that outstanding presentation. You've given us so much to think about. I wish we had another hour or two to really delve into some of these concepts that you've brought up for us to look at. So we have time for a couple of questions. Does anybody have anything that they would like to ask Al right away?
So Harry just wrote something there about the button for the dance floor. Thanks, Harry. And then Anna's typing as well. Big picture, great way to measure success, even growth. Thank you, Harry.
Jim, you can feel free to speak if you'd like. Or Don?
You're most welcome, Jim.
I speak a lot better than There we go. Okay. The balcony versus the dance floor perspective, that's good. Step away and look at the big picture. But the other thing that you mentioned in one of your slides is the modeling and the scenarios idea instead of just, almost letting things happening and see what goes on. That reminds me of the Toyota management system where they actually they try to predict what's going to happen and then measure against their predictability. Yeah. That way, it's not really a shot in the dark and kind of a random happening, but it's actually you're measuring. Are you judging the scenario correctly moving forward? I think that's a great image.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for that. Again, I'm so passionate about that point as well. There are so many ways where we can have different models and scenarios, and even in my time in Booz Allen, they were very famous in what's called war gaming, etc., and so forth, which is really very powerful. But also the whole notion of experimentation, because over the years, as we get more into agile and adaptability, the success of that hinges on, are we willing to try different things? Are we willing to, whether you call it minimal viable products or whatever the case might be, are we willing to really work with our team and the others we can connect with to test things out? So I found that to be very powerful as well, like you indicate. Thank you. Let's see a couple of others there. Thank you, Anna. Shana, like the reminder. Yeah, thank you. So Shana, thanks for mentioning that, because nothing, to me, it's almost like you better not do it than do it. If you're trying to be grateful and it feels forced, it is one of the things that actually breaks the unity of the team so much, especially if you look at it from a team standpoint. So that was a great comment on your part as well to remind us of that. Thank you. And that's, again, where when the mindset is there in a gratitude spot, it helps with gratefulness for sure. Let's see. Harry, thank you, Harry. Thanks, Sylvie. Responsibility, Harry. Thanks for that as well. True. Yes. So Anna likes sight. Sight in a way. What I like about sight in terms of picking that, Anna, is the. Again, we're talking in a way. It's a catchphrase, not just the elements of sight and the thoughtfulness, energy, but also the fact that it is back to us creating perspective, us being connected, us being more empathetic and sensing more. And I think that's, in a way, that's what I find catching. The P, Gem, and Gap is the perspective component, which is really a thread throughout the few points raised today, including the balcony concept that you commented on as well. Because to me, that's really how powerful it can be if I'm able to zoom in and out, kind of an exercise. That's the muscle we're talking about by getting onto the balcony like that, and that helps with the perspective. You're welcome.
So we have time for one more question, Al. I think Don has posed an interesting one, Don Officer, in the
Great.
chat.
Yeah.
Can you see that?
I may have missed it, so let me slide back. Yeah. So we all have different strengths. Demonstrating all the ones you list could provoke anxiety. Would you agree? So Don, very true. Don, my view though, and thank you for that. My view though is that without anxiety, we don't stretch. I know anxiety can become like a disease, and we don't want to get there, and especially the ones who have been affected by it, and I have family members who have been affected by that as well. But the reality is, to me, unless we are stretched to a great extent on, we are unable to be the leaders that we are expected to be to a great extent, right? So I think, finding ways, actually, what I usually do, and maybe that's a learning that I had from Curzon, is went back to the comment about, don't rely on the ones who have a certain strength in a certain area and promote them, etc. I would actually rather, look at the human attributes, back to the gratefulness aspect here, and that creates what is much easier and to build on, and what's much more credibly important and invisibly important. All the rest I can work on and other strengths. So I start with what's core. I start with those, what I called earlier, the secret recipe around curiosity and around really having that grateful mindset and adaptive mindset. And from there, to be honest, Don, I would have a less concern about anxiety, because if the person is right, if the person is open and ready to learn, anxiety hopefully can be much more controlled. I agree it could create that. I'm hopeful that stretching is also an important priority for all of us. Thanks, Don, for that.
Al, this was fantastic, and I don't know what's taken us so long to get you here as a guest presenter. We'll have to have you back. And I want to also express my appreciation to you, Al, for coming to so many of our monthly webinars. I know you're not just doing this because I asked you to speak as a leadership expert, thought leader. You are really in this work with us. So please stay engaged and involved with us. I know you bring so much to the table. And
thank you, Judy. A lot to learn from you and the group here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, stick around. We're going to just go through our little a set of contributions. We get these on a monthly basis usually. And I'm going to start with Harry Waldron's wonderful Get the Right Attitude Through Gratitude. This time it is Color the World Gratefully. And how he finds words and concepts that all relate to grateful leadership and make a point at the same time really astounds and intrigues me. I don't know how he does it, but we should all read these. They will be uploaded to the website within 48 hours. Just, constantly focus on positive and encouraging daily leadership. He goes to Color the World Gratefully. And I love his closing line. You can transform each new day into a great and grateful day. So thank you, Harry, for your ongoing contributions. And we are very grateful for them. So keep doing that. Keep doing. He's been doing this for a month. And Al, Harry worked with me at All PM. Remember, he used to write for All PM? And Harry was like a guide to our content. He helped me build that website from 10,000 to over 100,000. So he's helping us do that here too.
It's excellent.
It's been a little slower because there's so much competition. But okay, and then Donald Officer is also a monthly contributor. He does an article associated with a book or a thought leadership that connects, or he connects it to grateful leadership. And Harry does this wonderful little recap about the article. And I want to turn it over to Donald for a moment, just to tell us about this month's grateful connection. Whoops. We can't hear you, Donald. I'm not hearing. Roxy, can you help Don with that? With his audio?
I'm not sure. His mic is not muted, and he appears to be connected. So maybe it's muted within the webcam, Don?
Yeah.
Instead of within
You want
the
to try
room?
turning off the webcam for a moment and see if that helps your audio?
Yeah, and Roxy, sometimes maybe hitting the mute and unmute button could do the trick as well.
Yeah, let me try that. Don, how about now?
Obviously, Roxy, I'm assuming also he had the pull down button next to the mic. Sometimes, it's important to use that to connect the mic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's possible your headset was plugged in and switched your microphone. So if unmuting doesn't work, go to the mic icon at the top and click the drop down and select microphone and make sure that your headset is the one that is selected. There will be a small dot to the left of the one that is active right now.
Do you see that, Don? Just nod your head if you can see that, what Roxy's talking about in the drop down. Well, you know what? I think next time we're going to have a rehearsal with you, Don, before the session, along with the key presenter, because I know we've had a few issues with audio with you, and I'm so sorry. But I think we'll just read Harry's recap of your excellent article. He says, Don shares the challenges that professionals face in acquiring wisdom and improving their leadership skills. As illustrated through teaching day versus night classes, maturity and experience make a difference in receptivity for new ways of leading others. For example, a new manager may follow existing patterns and traditions so they fit into the system well, just like the day students clock into their classes every day. However, over time, professional growth takes place as leadership is more of an art than a science. As time-based maturity allows leaders to better integrate affirmation and gratitude. The sooner we find our way home in terms of creating better human relationships, the better for all concerned. And Don does an outstanding connection of all, major books to the Grateful Leadership offerings. And we are so grateful to him. And, I wouldn't dare speak about the article itself because it's so, it's actually so, it's academic and interesting at the same time. So I urge everybody to read this article. And he quotes books, Think for Yourself, and I have to put my glasses on to see, Restoring Common Sense in an Age of Experts and Artificial Intelligence. And he also talks about the book Range, Why Generals Triumph in a Specialized World by David Epstein. So sorry, Don, we weren't able to allow you to speak this time. Next time for sure, we're going to rehearse, okay? All right, and then I wanted to just play a little bit of this week's podcast. This was such an amazing story because in June, I was the opening introduction for a meetup webinar in France, and they allowed me to speak in French. So I wrote out my introduction very carefully, and I got a few little changes from the experts. Jennifer Sabine was the one who put it together, and Michelle Longpre delivered it, and she is a certified Grateful Leadership Instructor, level 2. And that was in June, and July, August, September, October. 4 months later, I get this amazing email from someone named Sylvie Ravel, who had been at that webinar. And I'm going to let you listen to just a little bit, because I was so taken by her email, I just had to do a podcast about it. So here we go.
Change your whole day.
Please.
Achieve superior results. I'm also Senior Vice President at the International Institute for Learning. Sometimes a simple email out of the blue can change your whole day, your mindset, and feelings of accomplishment. Just this past week, I received one such email from Sylvie Ravel from Paris, France, which I have her permission to share with you. Dear Mrs. Umlis, she wrote, I'm Sylvie from Paris, France. I'm writing to you today to express the affinity I feel with your work and to make a small request. I discovered your work in June through the Meetup online event Gratitude, clé de la réussite en temps de crise. Now I'll break in here to translate this. It means gratitude, key to success in times of crisis. I'll also take a moment to express my gratitude to Jennifer Sabine, CSM and PMP, plus Managing Director of IIL France, for coming up with this wonderful idea for a meetup in France. And I'm also very grateful to Michel Longpré, PMP and Executive Director of Gordian Management, and also, Grateful Leadership Certified Professional Level 2, for delivering this meetup after giving me the opportunity to introduce it in French. Okay, I'm very proud of this introduction. But Sylvie continues, I'm an English secondary school teacher currently in the process of a career change. Being turned toward the fields of mindfulness and well-being in the workplace, I was particularly interested by your approach to better well-being and productivity in the workplace. The webinar was informative and pushed me to learn more about your work. Now, I love that. This is Judy talking. I think it's so great to motivate any of you, and Sylvie in this case, to read more, learn more, participate more. So she continues, after reading your book, The Power of Acknowledgement, and visiting the Center for Grateful Leadership website, I was amazed and delighted to see how much your work and the principles it is based on resonate so deeply with my own vision and values. I was moved by your account of the editorial that received no response. And here I'll break in again to do a quick telling of the story Sylvie was referring to. Years ago, I was the publisher of a monthly newsletter for project managers on the website allpm.com. It took a tremendous amount of work and the coordination, editing, and reviewing of 10 articles from 10 different authors each month. But the feedback I got from the many thousands of members made it all worthwhile. One month, though, I got no response, so I started the following month's newsletter with a rather daring and outrageous introduction. I said, I'm depressed, and it's your fault. I went on to tell them that what made it all worthwhile was their feedback and appreciation. And yes, this was even before I wrote the book, The Power of Acknowledgement. And without it, I said, it just didn't seem worth the effort. Well, the response after that newsletter launched was amazing and immediate, with personal apologies for taking the newsletter and its publisher for granted, promising to do better next time, and promises of contributions they would make to make my job even better. It was so validating and wonderful that I came back to the job full of spunk and energy, and it was incredibly amazing. So Sylvie continues, I admire your courage to show your vulnerabilities.
And on that note, we're going to stop. You can see this, listen to this podcast on the Center for Grateful Leadership website. It's also on just about every podcast host platform that you could think of. So we hope you will go to this one and finish it. I wish we had more time to play the whole thing, but hopefully you'll all hear it, because I'm so grateful to Sylvie for reaching out to me. I mean, that's not something everyone would think of doing. I think a lot of people hear my invitation to reach out to me and they don't believe it, or they don't take it seriously. But I think it's happened with others who are here today. I think Angela also had that experience, and well, Don Officer interviewed me for a positive psychology newsletter, so we were already connected. We had one of the best interviews I've ever had for that newsletter. But I wanted to make the point that I do really feel such a sense of connection and pride when somebody reaches out to me. These are not just words. I really mean it. And I want to know how I can support you. And Sylvie was focused enough to say, what should I do next to bring me along this path? And Sylvie, I'm wondering if you want to just say a few words about your experience with writing the email, being at the webinar, and then finding yourself on a podcast. Now, you're unmuted, so you should be able to speak. And I know you were speaking before. Can we hear you, Sylvie? Roxy, any suggestions? Maybe you could just text. Oh, is that you? Sylvie? I thought I heard something, but anyway, if you want to text a few words, if you're not able to get your microphone working, we'd love to hear from you. And then I just want to ask Shana very quickly, do you have any updates for us about the thesis, your dissertation that you're writing about grateful leadership? Anything you'd like to share with us?
Sure, I am moving a whole lot slower than I thought I would be, but I am about 2/3 of my way through my chapter 2, and I'm getting ready to start working on the literature review for engagement and retention, and then I will have a rough draft of my chapter 2 that I'll then need to go through and start editing.
Now tell us the name of your dissertation again.
Sorry, I want to get it. I want to say it exactly correctly.
That's
so give me.
I could summarize it. I know what it's about.
Yes. The title is Grateful Leadership: Measuring Its Value in an Evolving, Globally Connected World.
Whoa, that is fantastic. Every time I hear it, I'm so thrilled with it. So we told Shane that she. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm excited to get past chapter 2 so I can start looking at how I'm going to, actually start the investigative process.
And please share your findings with me. I always have good reason to utilize excellent research. So thank you for being here, and thanks for taking this on. I think it's going to be very helpful to IIL's Grateful Leadership behavioral model and making it more accepted in the academic world, certainly, and in corporations as well, because some people think, well, it's so warm and fuzzy, how could it really be valuable? But we all know that it's not only wanted, but it's needed and necessary. So thank you, Shana. And I just wanted to share also, we have the International Project Management Day online conference launching on November 5th, and I'll be doing a 4-hour free course on the power of acknowledgement. I'm working very, very hard on it to make it the synthesis of 14 years of work, of writing, of speaking, of researching, and I hope you'll all be there. And Roxy, do we have a discount? Oh, there's a discount code for you. Hashtag IPM Day 2020. And the terribly expensive price of $59 for 26 hours of learning it will actually come to you for a $10 discount. So it'll be $59, $49. I have to do my math. So anyway, I would love to have you at my course and give me your feedback and your challenges. I love those too. And I just see something from Sylvie. After reading your book and listening to some of your podcasts and feeling the connection, it gave me courage to contact you. Oh, well, I am so thrilled, Sylvie, that you did that, because I'm disappointed when I say to people, you know, I'll welcome you when you join the Center for Grateful Leadership. I'll personally welcome you, and then I welcome them, and I never hear from them again. I'm building a relationship, or I want to be, with every single person who resonates with this work, because I know then you're a special person. If this resonates, you are somebody that can change the world and make it a better place. So on that note, we will wind up the webinar for October. Roxy, is there anything we should add to this? We're getting an article from Roxy in her Grateful Parenting series, which is wonderful, and I'm really looking forward to it. She did one article, the 10 tips for, Roxy, what was the title of it? As you can see,
10 tips for raising, 10 tips for raising children. And, you know, just so everyone knows, I have 2 half-finished articles. I've injured my hand, and typing is very difficult, and Judy so graciously told me that I could wait. And so I will try to get these on the website sometime within the next couple of weeks. I've taken on an additional role at IIL, and it's quite time-consuming. So I have not had a whole lot of spare time to write, but I will, you know, as soon as my hand starts feeling better, I'll get back on these.
And yeah, we can recycle your 10 tips. I think it was that good. So just put it brought back by popular demand. Why don't you do that, Roxy? Because that was such an enlightening article, and I shared it with my children so that they would know how to raise grateful grandchildren for me. And really some excellent things in there. Okay, well,
thank you. No problem. And the next article that I'm working on is about how gratitude is conscious. You know, you take a conscious effort, and it is a learned behavior. But some of it, you know, I believe is born into us as well. There's you know, people have a propensity to be more open to gratitude than others, and I think that that's an interesting subject on the neuroscience of that as well.
Oh, that sounds great. All right, thank you. And we're going to officially close the webinar now, but you're all welcome to stay on and chat and have a post-webinar treat.